Hi. How's quarantine?
One of the comments. Funny.
You're funny.
Layperson funny.
You're funny looking.
Yeah. Scruffy looking nerf herder.
Whoa. Hey, the racism has gone far enough, thank you. This is Ibo. He's the one that comes out with all the best ideas. What are we talking about today? It's a trap.
It's a trap!
Why you just shouldn't go to the touristy spots. That's what we've been nattering about today. So Kev, have you read Alain de Botton's The Art of Travel?
I haven't read it, but I've seen the TV show.
Yeah, me too. But I say to people, hey, have you read this book? But I've actually just seen the TV show. But it's really interesting. It reminds me of architectural travel. Like, it's travel with a purpose. Why do people go and choose to travel? Usually it's to escape, to get away somewhere. But the problem is they take the thing that antagonizes them most with them, and that's themselves. So they go to these tourist things, promised some sort of change in lifestyle and meeting amazing people, when in fact they just end up going to the usual spots and they're surrounded by other tourists, and it's sort of really expensive and it can be really soul-sucking.
You know, you look at the pictures, you look at it on Instagram. Okay, now you want you in front of that same thing for ownership, as if I've done it.
Yeah, it's much cheaper to just Photoshop it. Like, you see people just lined up in the same places. And so he says you need to have a purpose when you go traveling for it to actually be meaningful. And the great thing about architectural travel is it does give you meaning. But I guess what today's episode is about is don't fall for the usual traps, because there is very popular tourist-orientated architectural travel. Gaudi in Barcelona being one of them.
Eiffel Tower, gosh.
Yeah, why? There are these places that are so well documented, very well documented. What's not documented is just the wash of tourists that dominate the place, and the fact that you can't actually, it's difficult to get a critical view of those buildings because the tourists are in the way, and you're probably going to get a better critical view because they're so well documented elsewhere.
Referring back to Alain de Botton, he talks about in the TV series, he's got this couple that would go around Europe and looking for Second World War bunkers.
Yeah. Yep.
It could be in a middle of an industrial area, and then they will find this historical relic. You know, it really takes them out of the usual places that tourists would go to. And I think that makes it interesting because you start to see other parts that is not Photoshopped, that is not, colored to be a certain imaginary way the city is.
But yeah, I remember seeing exactly the same thing about those people collecting or visiting World War II areas, and just thinking that you could just cut that out and add the word architecture, and it's actually a very similar idea, including the planning of the trip. So there's something really amazing. He talks about that as well. That there was some fictional character in a book, that would plan these trips down perfectly and then never go on the trip. Like, it was actually the planning of the trip and finding these amazing potential experiences and getting it all organized and then just filing it away, because the trip would inevitably be a disappointment. And I think we've all been on very expensive trips that have been big disappointments. No? Well, you're not, because you're probably in that World War II bunker kind of thing. Like, you organize this stuff that is out of town. You're often drawn away.
Yes, the research.
Yeah.
You just follow.
The lazy one.
You have no idea where we're going half the time, or most of the time.
No.
We rock up somewhere and go, oh, we're here. I
know this building. This is that building by that dude, the person that did the drawings of the building. I know this one.
Madrid, for example, we go out to the suburbs and the churches. And I think for me, one of the first times was realizing going on a suburban line, an outer suburban line, and see a whole different demographic of people that I didn't know that were there. And suddenly realize, wow, this is how usually lower, social demographic kind of a group, and their ethnic groups, and how different they were, compared to the rest of Madrid, or even Spain for that matter, I've seen.
Mm.
And I think what's interesting is the destinations are definitely important, but the journey is probably even more important. And that's when you start to see how people live.
Yeah.
Rome, for example, most locals don't live in the center of Rome. They cannot afford it. So all the historical center, all the stuff you see of Rome is not how Romans live, as in people in Rome now.
Yeah.
I remember going out to the Richard Meier Church, the Jubilee Church. You catch this train, and then you walk somehow through and almost getting run over by cars. Coming to these old office buildings that turned into slums. It was really odd. Much mattresses on the ground everywhere. And then suddenly arrive at this kind of weird, pristine suburb, and then there's this church.
Yeah.
Very, very strange. But that's interesting to see that context. I mean, Sydney, for example, we go to the Punchbowl Mosque by Angelo Cantalepis. To see the western suburbs, the Muslim communities, it's quite important. It's not a side that Sydney-siders want you to see, and it's definitely not but it is part of the making of the city. And see those communities. And to see the mosque, it's a beautiful building. Which leads to another important thing about learning about buildings is that even if you study the plans, which I've used to make students to do and trying to work out how you move through the building, the journey doesn't start at the front door. The journey starts of how do people get there.
It's a really good point.
Go by bus, by car, whatever. That's part of the experience, and a good project responds to that journey as well.
So that's really a great point. A good project responds to it. But it's interesting that if a building becomes really popular, and I think of Ronchamp, Corbusier's Ronchamp, the way that you arrive gets subverted because the amount of tourist buses that are turning up changes the way that they're moving people in and out. So I can remember when I've only been there once, and you told me to catch a train and then walk up the hill. And that was an amazing experience, rising up to Ronchamp and then getting to a certain point and then going, shit, there's all these goddamn buses and people. Like, where did they come from? And they're just getting shipped in and shipped out. And there was no way Corb could have, understood the popularity of that cute local church. But of course, it's become one of the pin-up boys for architectural tourism. And it's changed the way that you travel through the city to arrive at that place, which is really unfortunate.
And this was, when you went, was before the Renzo Piano part as well. Now it's mad.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
big
why,
car park and visitor center. Yeah.
Yeah, for what is meant to be a cute locals
pilgrimage chapel.
Yeah, yeah.
Another place in Spain that was quite interesting was going to this in Basque country, especially Bilbao. Everyone goes to Bilbao for the Guggenheim.
Yeah.
And then there are a few other projects around the Guggenheim, but what else? What did people see? It was quite interesting. We went up to this little town called Ortuella, along the way, the Bay of Biscay. And, to see this library, this community center library building, going there, walking in and trying to take pictures, ask the librarians, is it okay if we do that? And the second year we went, I asked them again, hey, remember me from last year? Yeah, we want to see this. Next thing I know, he brought us to the mayor of the town.
Yeah,
and
right.
The mayor's going, what are you doing here? Why are you taking pictures? Where are you putting these pictures? I went, it's on social media. He said, please do. And then he's like making calls. We're following him. We're going, you should go see this. You should see that. And it called up another, the town architect. And there's actually a council building, which is in an old silo building. It was quite amazing just to have the mayor just getting so excited and, oh my God, people don't come to this. And getting so excited. And part of these things as well is that you go to towns like that. I remember in Germany, for example, we were stumbling along. We went to Marbach near Stuttgart to see the David Chipperfield Building of the Year, the Literature Museum.
Yeah.
But on the way, we look at the train and go, hey, that's the house by Jürgen Mayer.
Yeah.
And there's one stop away. So, we're going to backtrack and walk back over there and over the bridge, and and we did. And then afterwards, we were at the train stations, and you go, oh, 17 minutes till the next train. Let's go have a beer.
Yeah, that cute
And then
little
there's
place.
Yeah, and you walk in there, it's like a one-room space, tiny little bar, old men, just sitting there chain smoking away.
Yeah.
And then, this Asian guy and a big tall Aussie guy, there's Jesse, and you come in and beers, please.
Yeah. Dunk, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's actually my favorite part. Like, my favorite part is you set a target for somewhere and you try to take public transport. So you go in this sort of, community orientated way instead of just catching a taxi there, and you make your way there, and the serendipity, the chance, and it's amazing how often it's paid off into these beautiful moments, or stumbling across another building. That's the other thing I've always found is like the Mayer house. Like, what the hell? Like, I've loved that house forever. That's the reason to do it. Again, very different to the curated Disneyland-like experience that you purchase when you go to some of these really touristy ones. So you got to kind of work for it, but it's through that work of researching, working your way there, that you end up with these beautiful memories. What happened in between, the journey is the destination. Like, that's actually spot on with this stuff. Like, we got to that building, we thought about it was great building, or it was a shockingly bad building that I always loved and now I hate because it's shit. But what happens in between that is often where all the joy is. Thanks for watching, everybody. Ibo, Kevin, and I really appreciate it. Please like, comment, subscribe, leave a comment. Seriously, tell us about your travels, what the do's and don'ts are for you. Tell us some terrible stories. What's gone wrong when you've traveled?
Yeah, what has been your most disappointed?
And we'll see you in the next one. Woo!